Right, this talk on sort of contesting came about, yeah, that'll do it, I think. That came about because Chippenham Radio Club sort of rang me up and said, looking for somebody to talk on contesting, will you do it? And I said, yeah, okay, right, what do you want it for? And they said, oh, new licensees, beginners. So this talk is aimed basically at new licensees. So anybody who's done contesting, you're going to be bored to tears, guys. Sorry, but that's where it is, eh?
That'll be the M7, isn't it?
That'll be the M7, the M7 and 2, yeah, that's another story, okay. So I went down to Chippenham the other night, and how many were there, Dom? About 15, 16? About 15, 16. And I think there was one new licensee, or one new intermediate, there was no, yeah, but it was okay. Once we got this thing working, it was fine. But if I suddenly stop speaking, it most probably because I'm going to cough or something, okay. Right, so contesting, we're going to have a look at why contest, what types of contest are there, how do you go about it, login is a sort of important thing with contest, and we might have a little bit of a look at hardware. None of these are going to be in-depth looks because it was meant for sort of beginners. Well, I took the approach that if it's meant for a beginner, and some of you have seen this bit before, what can I do with my license? You can either use it, and notice how out of date I am, I haven't put FT8 in there, or you can do nothing. But most people need some sort of motivation or targets to go for. And targets can be various sort, can't they? There can be one that's, you can keep going till the day you're not on this earth anymore, or you can have something that's time-bounded. So the time-bounded ones would be lifetime, and the others could be short, they can be hours, days, or years. But, so, sort of need to sort of set some targets and monitor, and contests are quite useful for that. Many targets already available, already out there. These are, if you like, lifetime targets, DXCC, the Century Club, Islands on the Air, Worked All Britain, and then the ones that Andrew over there does from time to time, Summits on the Air. They're ones that are targets that are already out there for you to go at. And then contests or shorter targets, CQWW, the single sideband leg of which is the weekend after this weekend, hello. And then there's the ones that several of us have a go at, there's the ACs, there's 2 metre, 77, 4 metre, 6 metre. So there's those about. And then of course there's our own, that we try and do a different one each year. So they're the sort, yes, have you all updated your logs on that? Yeah. They're the sort of ones that are available already, they're there, so you don't have to do anything different to do it. But you can set your own targets. Like you can do QSO a day, I'm going to work so many countries this week or something like that. On FT8, I understand that's quite a lot as well, but that's another story. So how do I control or monitor my targets? Just go back to that one a minute. A lot of that bottom one is to do with logging and how you log things, and I'll deal with that nearer the end. Right, contests. As we said, we looked at, there was short ones and long ones. Short 1.5 to 6 hours, like the AC contests. The FM ones are just an hour, aren't they, Don? Yep. Yeah, the FMs are on there. Eh?
The 80 metre auto ones are an hour long.
They're an hour longs, yeah. So if you just fancy having a go, they're there. Got various RSGB club contests. Then there's medium ones, which, there's quite a few 24-hour ones. And then there's the long ones, like 48, like CQWW and things like that. But it still hasn't sort of told us why contests. So why? Well, it's a never-ending challenge to do better. If you do it this week, you do it next week. Did I do better? Did I do worse? Why did I do better? Why did I worse? So it's a never-ending challenge to try and improve your own way of working. Things you've got to think about. A lot of these contests have got different groups. And, I mean, for example, if you're an M6 or an M3 or an M7, oh, nobody bit on that one, okay. If you're a new licensee running only 10 watts, then there's not a lot of use in going in the high power one and competing with people in the States or in Ireland who can run 1.5 kilowatts. So, you know, choose your category. Your category, there's all sorts of issues with category. Then work out when you've done an event. A lot of people set targets. You do, don't you, Ian? You set a target when you go in a contest. I sort of don't, because I tend to feel that I don't know how I'm going to feel if I get too tired, and you never know what the propagation's going to do. But I'm usually disappointed if I didn't do better than last time. Let's put it that way. So that's my target. But a lot of people sort of sit down and set targets. But it is important when you finish the event, as soon as, if it's a long one, as soon as you have finished and got your thoughts together and work out what went. I always do lists of what went right, what went wrong, what should I have done differently, knowing what I know now, what could I have done differently. Just a minute. And contesting can make your station better, and it can make you a better operator, but it does rely on this sort of business, working out what went on and so on and so forth. So contests are good for honing your listening skills, definitely. Work in new countries, entities if you want it. Depends on the contest, of course. So even on 2 meters, if you've got a good location, you can work. We worked on France, Germany, Belgium, Netherlands, and if you're lucky, Belgium. Getting the best out of your station, you learn. And then wondering why you can't be heard. Well, if you're only running 10 watts, that's a bit of a problem. But okay, it's a start. The main thing is to have fun. That's quite difficult sometimes, because if you're tired and you're cursing yourself for not having done as well, it's a bit difficult to think, did I have fun? But at the end of the day, you most probably did, or you wouldn't do it again. But the important thing about contests is to fulfill a lot of these things. You need to know the rules. And the number of people who come on and you'll sort of give you something and you say, well, I need so-and-so. Oh, what's that? So they've gone on a contest, only to give a few points away, fine. But they don't know the rules. But before you know the rules, you've got to know what contests there are on. And where do you find that stuff? Well, that one used to be a good one. In fact, it's not run by him anymore. It's run by an SK. But I looked at that the other day, and it's only current to the end of September. It's got none of the October ones on. So there are others. For RSGB contests, you can look up, there's 2 sites, HF and VHF. There's an ARRL contest calendar, which has got quite a lot on. And if you just look up amateur radio contest calendar, there's quite a good one there that will let you flick to the various contests. So it's not difficult to find. But that's the one that people swear by, but I'm going off that. Because, as I say, it wasn't up to date when I looked at it the other day. Radcom doesn't always give them all. Doesn't always give you some of the little obscure ones. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. I mean, let's get it right with a contest. You might decide to go on the air and you realise there's a contest on and you've no idea what it is. Now, if it's one of the King of Spain something or other, or somebody else's thing, or somebody else's country-only thing, it might not be in Radcom, and you do need to know what it is if you're going to give any points away. You know, you really do need to know. So let's have a think about categories. Well, categories can vary by mode. Some contests, they're either sideband or CW or data. Some you can do CW and sideband. Some you can do data. There's not any, I don't think, that mix the lot, is there, Ian? I don't think there's many that do data as well. So you need to know what the mode is. It's no use you saying, there's a contest this weekend, getting on with your sideband rig and realising it's CW. That's a bit late then if you don't do CW, and Vicky Verky. Power level, as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of the contests have different power levels. For example, the ACs, the 2 metre ACs, and I think the others are the same, but the power levels might be slightly different. They have a 10 watt category, a 100 watt category, and a full whack category. So there's no use going, I was very careful when I said that. There's no use going in for the 400 category if you're only going to run 10 watts, to be quite honest. Which bands, because contests do vary. For example, there are not many general HF contests, Ian will put me right here if I get it wrong, which have top band in. CQWW does, But there's very few others. Does Beru?
No.
No. Have top band in, so it's no use put yourself a top band aerial up, thinking I'll go in the contest this weekend, and you find it doesn't have top band. WPX does, yeah. So there's not many that have top band. That's an example. And of course, none of them, says he, have the walk bands in. That was one of the deals. I think that's what was decided again amongst all the countries, informally, albeit, when we got the walk bands, they weren't going to use them for contesting. Fixed or portable, sometimes it matters, sometimes it don't make much difference. But, you know, there might be different categories there. Single transmitter or multiple transmitter. CQWW is a classical example. IOTA is another one. You can have a single transmitter, single operator. You can have a single transmitter, multiple operators. You can have two transmitter with the operators, and then you have multiple transmitters, depending on the contest entirely. You know, now, where's that one going? That's one, you see, it can be a bit misleading, because that one, that was when I was in Mozambique, and that was first place, single sideband, multi-single. Now what that meant was multiple operators, single transmitter. That's what that meant. And that's one way, by the way, of getting up the rankings. Pick a category that nobody else is doing much in. And one or two people around here have been known to do that, like me and James and we in. But why not? Why not? Okay, that's a typical sort of, that's the, I'm sorry, will that focus any better, Dom? I don't know if it will. If you look at the middle, no, not really, does it? No. No, it wasn't a particularly good one. I didn't have time to take a better one than that off. That's a typical sort of RSGB VHF contest calendar. And the beauty about that is if you look up the top somewhere, you can find the rules. And it does also tell you there which rules and what categories there are. Sections, sections, and it will tell you sometimes what rules, because sometimes special rules apply. Some people think the RSGB's way of doing it is weird, but at least it gives you a clue. You can read the rules in some contests and you're none the wiser when you've read them. That's what I found anyway. That's CQWW for this year. You got the same thing. All you've got to do is Google CQWW, get that site up, and then the rules for this year. Okay, and that shows you the bands. You see, that's all the bands. So it's one of the few that does top band. Okay. Again, you need to look at the sections hard on that one. But you've now found yourself a contest. You're going to have a listen. What the hell do all these numbers they're yattering at mean? Well, most of us here, I suspect, will know that 59341 IO 91 Delta November. Similar. So the report is HF is nearly always given in 5.9, so most people are saying now, why do we bother with it? Whereas at VHF, people tend to be slightly more realistic. I don't know about you, Andrew, and you, Dom, but on the ACs, I just give either 5.9, 5.5 or 5.1, something like that, you know, one of about three. Eh?
Try and work out reasonable ones.
Yeah, you know, just give them a clue that you're not end stopping or I'm struggling to hit you, sort of thing. Serial numbers quite common, but not all contests have serial numbers. For example, the CQWWs, weekend after next, you don't have serial numbers. You might get all sorts of other info. We've already mentioned the locators. CQWW, if you're in this country, you'll give 5914. You just give your CQ zone. And for IOTA, you give Echo Uniform 123 if you're on Echo Uniform 123. We are EU 005. But they're not all that obvious. They're fairly well-known ones. They're not all that obvious. There's even one contest, I can't remember which one it is, can you? Is it one of the Japanese ones? You give your age. You don't have to give accurately age, but it's normally give your age. And ladies are allowed to give 21, aren't they? If they want to. And if you have multiple operators, you each give your age when you get there. It doesn't have to be your accurate age, but it's just normal to give your age. So there's that one, which is a bit of a laugh. And particularly if you tell them you're 103, they don't believe you.
There's another one,
gives you year you're licensed.
Oh, that's right. There's a year you're licensed or number of years you've been licensed?
No, the year you're
Yeah,
licensed.
okay. Yeah, so there's all sorts. So hence, backtracking a bit, you need to look at the rules, and in particular for the exchanges. So there's one contest that gives the power you're using, and it makes almost everybody in the high power section a liar. I didn't say that. I didn't say that. In case you don't know what CQ zones are, that's the CQ zones map of the world, and you can see we are 14. Now the disadvantage with 14 is there's lots of people in it. When we were in Mozambique, of course we were down in there, 37, and I think there were 2 stations in 37 that year, so we were popular. So if you want to win CQWW in one category, get yourself somewhere to a fairly rare location, like 39's not bad. 39's not bad.
What about Sri Lanka? Oh,
No, that's yeah. I'm trying to think of the rare ones. 40. There's not many in 40, are there?
no, there wouldn't be many.
There's not many in 40. Yeah, two have lost 2. Where is 2? Oh, 2. Yeah.
That's
Basically, a lot of Siberians, aren't
Yeah. Okay, so that's that. Right, if you're going to plan to operate in a contest, you've got to decide how serious you're going to be. How ambitious should I be? I'm going to go out and win. That's you, Ian, isn't it? But Ian's been doing it, which is fair comment, but that's doing it for a long time. How ambitious should I be? Which category should I enter? Well, we've already talked about that, but it is important. And by category, I don't just mean power. I mean, are you going for low power single area, low power multiple aerials, depending what the contest is. I mean, in the 2 meter ACs, I go for AR, which is up to 100 watts and 1 aerial. The people who are doing open category can run up to 400 watts, but they can have aerials pointed in any direction, which if you're going to in 2 meters, which is you want to work a good rate, is quite useful. But if I even wanted to run 100 watts, as soon as I put a second aerial up, I'm changed category. So you do need to look carefully at the rules again. What's the competition like? Well, I have been known to look at the last 3 or 4 years' results and say, nobody ever does that one, I'll do that. Well, so the name of the game, isn't it? What hours can I do? That can get important because if conditions are bad, like they have been sometimes this year, the only bands that might be open might be the lower end bands. So there's no use possibly you've been able to do from 9 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon when the HF bands are closed. So you need to have a bit of a think about it. But more important, if you're going to do the likes of the 48-hour ones, so you can't do 48 hours now, single operator, can you, Ian? It's 30 hours, 36. No, I thought CQWW was the same. You can only do 36 hours.
No.
Okay.
48.
All right. Okay.
Which is very difficult.
It is difficult. Yeah, it is difficult. Trying to do 48 hours is flipping hard. It really is flipping hard. What hours can I do? What commitment am I going to make? So that's related really to that one, isn't it? How ambitious should I be? If you're doing CQWW for the first time, just have a listen round and try and work 1 or 2 points. Try and feel what it's like. It's also, I didn't mention, it's also very good, CQWW and the like, for teaching you about propagation. Because you can look up some of the propagation programs and say that should be open then, that should be open then. You'll find when there's a contest on, things are very often open when they're not at any other time because there are so many people on. But it is quite good for getting the feel for propagation. So are all these contest stations big, huge stations? Well, there's 1 or 2 around. You know where that is, Ian? M6T. Yeah, that's over on the east coast-ish somewhere, isn't it? M6T.
Suffolk, is it?
Suffolk way somewhere, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, no, that's it's on a farm. Yeah,
Somebody's farm.
yeah. That's another view. The odd aerial here and there, sort of thing. Fancy a 40-meter beam? Okay. So, and that's a multi station. They've got transmitters, of transmitters to operate every band, more or less every band at the time, although people don't usually have transmitters to operate 10 right down to top band. They normally they assume they're not going to be working 10 metres in the evening and switch stations, things like that. But most of these have got at least five stations. So that would be a multi in CQWW. Amazing, isn't it? That's been set up over a long time, that one. That really has. But yes, if that's some people's hobby and they want to put money into it.
Must have been fun in all of them high winds the other week.
Oh, they would have had them down. No, they would have been down.
They're all trailer towers.
They would. No, they're not. No, they're not. No, they're not. No, not all trailer towers. No, they're not all trailer towers. Some of them are. Yeah, they pull them. They lower them down anyway. They lower them down. But they're all guide. Most of them are guide. But they lower most of them down. Okay, so what sort of elements do we need to think about in a contest station? You need a rig to start with. You need some aerials. You might need some software. You might not. Depends how you're going to do it. You might need some internet support. You might not. But to some degree, how the investment you have to make doesn't necessarily mean money. It might mean the time in you getting set up, the time in you doing your category. Or if you've got limited to kit, like you've got 10 watts and a single element or a wire aerial, that might decide your category. So you do need to think about these things. Transceivers. You do need to think a little bit about the capabilities, the properties of a transceiver, but it's not easy. If it's hard to operate the transceiver, you can get listening fatigue or just general fatigue operating the blooming thing. Its strong signal performance is quite important, because in a contest, on a band that you never believed had any signals on it, you'll suddenly find sometimes there are big signals everywhere, and your rig has got to be able to deal with them. Same as IP3, similarly. The rig and your linear, if you're lucky enough to be able to run a linear, needs to be fairly cool running. You don't want stuff getting too hot. Rig selectivity's got to be very good, and if you've got DSP, that's got to be suitable to work anyway. It's no use you having, if you particularly, it's not so bad with if it's just you, but if you're running two stations, multi or multi-2, that's very important. When I was in Mozambique, we had two K3s and an FTMP 1000, and we couldn't use the 1000 if we were running on 15 and 12 or 12 and 10, because the phase noise, the wide transmit noise from the 1000 descends to the other bands, even with the K3. Use two K3s and it was fine. So you do need to have some idea if you're going to use more than one. Ergonomic.
Oh, you've got a near neighbour.
Oh, you got a near neighbour, yeah. Ergonomics, well, that's to some degree comes in with fatigue as well, because if you've got to fiddle faddle and play about with it and it's not common sense, it can slow you down, particularly when you're tired. As Ian says, if you are going to have a go at 48 hours, you wouldn't believe the stupid things you can do after about 36 hours. Okay, reliability is obviously very important. And no transceiver, that includes the K3 and of those, will fulfill all of those. Somewhere there's always a compromise sort of necessary. But there are some good contesting transceivers around. What about aerials for contests? Well, we can't all have aerials like that picture we saw of M6T. That's a bit beyond the pale, that is. That's quite jealous, really. Pete Chadwick will always say the only trees you should have in your garden should be aluminium ones, but that's, again, where he lives, he might get away with that, but I don't think we're... So, again, you need to think about category. I mean, it might well be, if you're going to go in lots of bands, like if you're going to do CQWW, and you've only got room for one antenna, then you want a multi-band antenna, unless you're going to go single band. So it's related very much to the category you're going to go into. There we are, single band or multi-band. If you can, not always possible, avoid traps. Traps tend to be lossy, but in contests I'm not sure that's a major issue. Do you go for a vertical? Do you go for horizontal? If you've got a vertical antenna, fine, but you might want some wires up as well, because depending on the band, depending on the location of the antenna, depend on the height of the horizontal, the angle of radiation is going to vary. So you might well can hear lots of the UK on a vertical, but you can't hear a long distance, or vice versa. So you need to think about all sorts. This is where learning about your station and learning about these things comes in. If you've got horizontal, do you want a beam or do you want omnidirectional? Well, it wouldn't be omnidirectional if it was a dipole, would it? But you know what I mean. 4 squares. Now, somebody asked me the question the other night at Chippenham, what's a 4 square? Anybody here not know? But basically, it's 4 vertical aerials, normally, 4 vertical aerials spaced for the same band. Quarter waves usually, not always. Quarter waves usually you can get them half waves, dipoles. Quarter waves with equal ground planes, all tuned up, and then you can put phasing, connect them to one common point, and then phase them so as it can point that direction, that direction, that direction, that direction, whatever. You can also make some loop aerials as well, vertical loop aerials that do a similar thing. In Botswana, we had 4 squares for 40 metres, 30 metres and 80 metres. 80 metres. They were brilliant. They really were. You could get rid of the Italians even. That was pretty good. That was it was hard to do, but we managed it with that good. If you want to work VK and the Italians are yelling down your back. Broadband, do you want a broadband receive antenna? All things to think about. Most people, other than the likes of M60, are going to be limited by what land they've got and what they can put up. I accept that, but you still have to think about these things. Winning antennas can cost just a few pounds. Yeah, okay. I didn't put that one in. That was from somebody else. That was from Don BJ, and I thought, yeah, okay. If you've got the right location. It's possible, because I got a friend that lives down on the Pembrokeshire coast. Farm, you've been there, Ian, haven't you? Rob's place? You haven't been to Rob's place. And it's lovely. He lives about a kilometre from a cliff edge, and the ground down to the sea slopes like that. And he can put anything up, and States and South America is just like that. It's ever so easy. And it's quiet as well. So he could put a dipole up and get away with things that I wouldn't stand a cat in hell's chance around here. There's one theory that there's people who want to just put antennas up, and if it stays up for a year, it's not high enough. Maybe. That's most of the big contests, like that contest station we saw. They tend to take place at the equinox and places like that. When, as we've already found out, the winds are high, so reliability is a bit better. Put them up to stay up. You don't want to be putting stuff up every year. Now, we talked earlier on about how do we record our targets and how we're getting on with our targets. Well, in a contest, you've got to do that more or less as you go, because some of the contests now, you have to put your log in very quickly. Some give you 5 days, some give you 1 day. There's some now that are 2 hours, aren't there? Some of the 1 hour. 1 hour. So that basically means you can't write it down on paper and then transpose it. You haven't got a chance. You really haven't. But to deal with login software in any depth, we're not going to do that here tonight. We just can't. But you do need some login software. Basically, login software, there's 2 types. There's day-to-day logging, which is not for contests, although a lot of them will do contests, but they don't do it as well as a contest logger. And there's contest logging that's meant specifically for contest. And as I say, they are different. Day-to-day loggers, there's all sorts. Oh, this is contest loggers. There's contest loggers. Wintest, you have to buy Wintest. Not that expensive. That's a French one, isn't it? French crew.
30 euros.
30 euros, and it's quite nice. Wintest is relatively simple. It hasn't got as many bells and whistles as the next one, which can get very complicated, but it's relatively simple. It works. We used it in Botswana twice. I think we used it in Mozambique. If you're a DXpedition, it's free. You can have a DXpedition value free. And the other popular one for contest now is N1MM Plus. You use that, Andrew?
Under duress.
Under duress. For For the RSGB AC contest, there's one called Minos, but that's okay, but I haven't sort of looked at hooking the rig up to that yet, so as I'm getting the rig as well, you know. But they're all right. Day-to-day loggers, there's all sorts. Logger 32, DX Lab, Ham Radio Deluxe, WinLog 32. And they're all getting somewhat more complicated as people want more and more things with them. You know, we can go on forever and a day, if you like. Now, this is a sort of brief picture of some of the windows in N1MM, which I use for contesting. Now, most rigs these days have got 2 VFOs. So if you know what you're doing, you can have VFO1, VFO2. And the software is such that if you hit the right key, it'll move from there to there. It'll do it automatically, in fact. That's where your log goes. So as you log things, it goes in there, so you can see what you've logged. That's what you call a band map. So if you hear somebody you want to work and put him in there, but then there's a pile up, and you don't want to wait, you just tune off him and it'll plonk it in there. And depending on whether it's a multiplier, like we haven't talked about multipliers, I know, but depending on what colour it puts it in there. And the beauty about, you can set this N1MM up for the specific contest. So it will change these boxes to suit what you need. For example, if it was IOTA, then it will stick in a locator box. There's no locator box there at the moment. And all you need to do is tab along and it'll move to the next box that you should be needing. Quite useful. It does take a bit of getting used to first time, but you get there. Setting it up's the initial thing. That's just a world map with grey line on them on that. This is, some people consider to be cheating. This is super check partial. And what that does, if you give your call sign to the outfit that do this and say, yeah, I contest, they'll put you in there as a valid call sign. So if you put G4L up, all the G4Ls it's got in its base, it will put up there. Yeah, well, they do, yeah. If you send them your contest log, that's what happens. So you put G4LD in there, then it'll come with all the G4LDs, which is not a lot of use for DLs and things like that with lots of countries, but in countries where there aren't many stations, that can be quite useful. Excuse me just a minute. The box is down here for CW use, basically. Okay, so that's a typical sort of N1MM, and the only way really to learn N1MM is get somebody to show you. Because if you dig the manual out, the manual's about X hundred pages long, and it's sometimes quite difficult to find what you need in there. Right, internet support. What I didn't talk about, just let's go back to that one a minute. What I didn't talk about, you can also populate that window. You can pick up spots off the internet, off the cluster, which we'll now go on to talk about. Now again, if we go back to category, some of the contests, and CQWW is one, you can go in an assisted category or an unassisted category. I go in for unassisted, and it just means you're not looking at the internet, you're not looking at the cluster. Everybody know what the DX clusters are? Know what a cluster is? Anybody not? You all got some idea what a cluster is? Okay. It's basically, yeah, it's basically where people work something or hear somebody, they put it on the internet and it goes into a specific program which highlights these things and shows them up. There is a move towards allowing cluster or reverse speaker network support in all categories of entry. I don't want that because I go in CQWW unassisted, and there's less people in unassisted than there are in assisted. The disadvantage with unassisted is if I'm working a contest and I'm calling CQ in one hand and then listening, and I hear a station that is a pile-up, I think that might be a multiplier for me. The problem you get if you're unassisted is you don't know what his call sign is. And you're trying to get his call sign, and whenever he says 5914TU, bang, everybody else transmits. So even if he gives his call sign, it can take you half an hour to get his flipping call sign. And that's time you can't afford, you know. So unassisted has disadvantages. The login band map, that's the one I set up on the left. You can set the persistence. In other words, if I've put a call sign in there, and said, I want to work him, you need really just to make sure you don't, and in N1mm it's difficult to find. You don't want it there for 8 hours possibly, because the band might be closed. You might only want it there for half an hour. And again, you can set bandwidth, in other words, how big the spread is on the band. But there's all sorts of these little things you can do. You can choose what to display. You can either say, I only want multipliers, and we haven't talked about multipliers, I know, or everything that I haven't worked. And on CW, you can use the reverse beacon network, which basically listens for CQ calls and says, I've heard this CQ call from there, doesn't it? That's basically it. And it puts it on a DX cluster. But it's as well not to rely on the cluster. One of the reasons being, of course, that a lot of people look at the cluster. They see a new one come up, whang, they're all in there. If you're not careful, you can spend ages looking. That's part of the enjoyment I find, is listening round and finding multipliers yourself. I like that.
They also might get the call sign wrong.
They'll very often, a number of times you see a call sign come up in a cluster and it's wrong. And everybody's logging it. Keep going, guys. Right, and going back to N1mm, we only looked at some of the windows, but there's lots and lots of windows on there you can put up. If you've got 2 monitors, you can get a lot of them up. The band map we saw, the check we saw, there's a digital interface, the entry windows we saw, grey line we saw, the log we saw. There's all sorts of other things you can do, like showing you multipliers. That's multipliers you've got, as opposed to multipliers you haven't got. Now, there's all sorts of multipliers. On CQWW, it's simply, is it countries and zones? It's countries and zones, yeah. So if you work the States, zone 5, you immediately get 2 multipliers. You can have a summary of your score. You can put a spectrum display. So you need, you need the right connections for that. You have a telnet connection, which will allow you to bring up the DX cluster on there and pick spots off the DX cluster. So there's lots of bits and pieces there that are useful. That's not a good one. I really ought to have got a better one than that. That's a spot. That's a cluster from DX Lab. There's too much information on it, really. That's on my day-to-day logging, not contest logging. There's far too much info for contest. That's basically the DX that's been spotted. That's the frequency, mode, and who spotted it. You don't need much more than that, really. The significance of the colours there is red means I haven't worked it in any band, any mode.
Do you want more tea?
No, that won't help now. Just let me have a rest for a minute. The green ones means I've got it on a band, but not on the band that's showing there. So there's all sorts of ways you can set that up. That's a fairly complex one. Really meant for DXCC rather than a contest. Contest, you want much quieter than that. So, can you contest? Why not? There are 3 there's 4 in fact, members near the top of the UK entries in CQWW, some of whom haven't got much of what you call station. Den runs an inverted L, with a 7 meters high and 100 watts. Portable, he runs a 10 meter fishing pole and the vertical, an LG-ATU. That's some websites, don't worry about those, I'll put that up later. So, yeah, you don't have to have a big station, you don't have to pay a fortune to go out and do some contesting. Dom, your turn. I'd forgotten he was, yeah. Don goes out and does small contests, don't you, Dom? And
Yeah,
you do it with minimal stuff. Sorry, I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, probably a lot of you know that I've got into doing quite a bit of contesting, but I've sort of stuck to doing the UHF and VHF ones on 2 meters and 70. And a lot of the stuff that Tony mentions there, I can vouch for it. When I first got into doing the contests, which was, I started off on the 2 meter FMAC, FMAC, and the 77's FMAC. And originally I started off with just the vertical whip on my car and a cheap Chinese radio. And whilst the Chinese radio is absolutely great for working repeaters and sort of having a chat to the locals, I soon found out that it was absolutely rubbish for contesting, because the front end of it is absolutely wide open, and so it suffered really, really badly from desensing and adjacent interference. So that was the first bit of a learning curve. So I swapped that out for a decent Yaesu FT8800 and started operating with that, and found out that I was beginning to do better with that. And then as I continued doing the FM and a bit on the AC, the UK ACs as well, I noticed that there were still more stations. By looking at the results at the end of the month, I noticed there were still other stations doing better than I was. And in the logs, when you put the log in, a lot of them tell you what equipment they're using. And I found out a lot of the people on FM were actually using beams rather than verticals, although in the rules it says you can use anything. They do allow the use of beams. And so I then decided to swap my antennas over on the days that I was contesting, and I went for a Moxon on 2 meters and a 10 element beam for 77s. Again, quite small antenna, but just plonked them on top of a fishing pole at the top of Barbary Castle, and then started operating with them, and it's vastly improved. Yeah, so yes, I started using the Moxon and the 10 element beam, and I found that my scores jumped incredibly, and I was getting much longer distance. The Moxon isn't massively directional, but it is quite directional, and I found that working horizontal, that I was getting much further distances. And just to give you an idea, on 2 meters I've worked way up into Yorkshire. I've worked on probably the best one on 77s on the beam. I worked Northern Ireland on 77s. I worked down into, funny enough, whenever the last one was, I worked into Jersey. So yeah, I've been doing quite well. So again, it just shows you there was a complete learning curve there. And when I started, I wasn't taking it serious, and I still really don't take it that serious. I do it because I have fun doing it. But it just so happens that in my category on 77s on the FM, I go in, because my radio gives me 35 watts on FM. I've gone into the 50 watts restricted category, yeah, and I'm actually running in 3rd place in the UK at the moment in that category.
In all fairness, it must be said he is at Barbary Castle.
They're going to say
Yeah.
portable in that. Good.
Yeah.
Chef, that's not good.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll do it from up there. But so since then, I've also started doing the 80 meter UK and Ireland one now, which I did my first one on the Wednesday at the beginning of the month. And I did this one from home, just using my FT817, so only 5 watts, and I just slung up a long wire inverted L antenna. I wasn't expecting much, because 80 meters at my QTH is constant S8, S9 of noise, permanent.
That's quite around there, not where we are, isn't it?
Permanently, so I wasn't expecting much, but I got quite a few contacts. Can't remember off the top of my head how many I got, but I was quite happy. I thought, well, that wasn't bad for a first go. And as it happened, this is one of the contests where the results you have to submit your logs within an hour, and I think I did all my logging on paper, which was a bad idea, because I then had to try and put them into some form of logging software. And I think I managed to submit my log with 2 minutes to spare before they were due in. but was pleasantly surprised that I came in second place in the QRP section, which I was quite happy with, considering that was my first attempt at it. So a lot of the stuff that Tony's mentioned in there, it is amazing what you can do. It's and it's fun. I do it because it's good fun. It's a great opportunity for seeing how well your equipment is working, how far you can get out, and it's a great way of learning new things about which antennas work better, what radios work better, and things like that. So I've had great fun doing it. So it's worthwhile.
Well, I think it's certainly worth mentioning to anybody who is newly licensed, if you see them, that the RSGB in their wisdom, and I would agree with it, have had this hour contest starting before the normal AC contests for people with FM. Yep. Just to try. But as Don learned, there's certain types of radio are okay, unless you haven't got another station within 100 miles of you. And you need to sort out polarizations. Oh, thanks, Tom. That's great. Thank you. Okay, there are some. We can go back to those if needs be, but there are some URLs thing. There is also some global logging. We sort of talking contesting mainly, but if you want to keep track of things, you can use contests for getting further countries or entities for DXCC. So if you put them on Logbook of the World, who's got the Logbook of the World? I know you've started now. Who's got Logbook of the World account? Anybody? Yeah. Okay. All right. If you do anything of any quantity, it's worthwhile. Or the other thing you can go on is Club Log. Club Log's quite useful. You can a lot of logging programs now. You can make it log straight into Club Log, can't you, Ian? Can you do it for Logbook of the World as well? I've never managed with Logbook of the World.
You can, yeah.
You can. I've never managed it yet, but I'd Club Log. As soon as I make a contact, bang, it goes into Club Log. It's also worth saying, going back to N1MM, the contest logger. It has bridges. You can get a bridge which will put all your contacts also in your day-to-day log. So if rather than do a contest and then transfer them, it will log them in both if you've got a day-to-day one.
Can you still use your paper logbook?
Paper?
Yeah, your logbook, you write
Yeah,
in the...
yeah.
Yeah, but then you've got to submit it.
But if you're going to submit it in anything, I don't think there are many contests now where you can actually submit a paper log. IOTA was one of the last, and I think they've stopped. But there are now lots of programs that if you just type it into an Excel spreadsheet, it will put it in the format you need, which is usually either Cabrillo or ADIF.
To me, that I can't do.
Yeah. Okay. So.
There are other people in the house.
Yes.
Eh?
There are other people in the house.
Yeah. Okay. So this really was meant for beginners again. So what can you do with a license? Then they go out and do it. Okay. I just want to move on slightly because we got one or two more people here that think. Some of you may recall that several years ago I did a little talk on SO2R. That's single operator 2 radios, which sounds a bit daunting, which it sort of is, but it's a way of, it gives you a chance to be operating two things at a time. In other words, you can be calling CQ on one band, and while you're waiting for a reply, listen for multipliers on the other band. You can also do a version of that with two VFOs, can't you? A version, not quite the same. In other words,
SV2R.
yeah,
SV2R.
SV2R, which is what I normally do. So in other words, you have your two VFOs, and you're listening to them both. When you're calling CQ on one, which you automate, obviously you can't hear on the other one, but as soon as that one drops, you're listening on both VFOs. That's quite hard. And SO2R is even worse.
It's important to notice the rule for that is you can only transmit on one.
Yes, one band at a time. Yeah.
I was going to say, you can't do CW11 radio.
No.
To sequence it properly.
Yeah, well, we'll come to that in just a minute. If we might, yeah. Why? Because, SO2R means you can be, if there's two bands open, you can be operating two bands. You know, as straightforward as that. But it does mean it reduces the number of choices. So if you think you're on CQWW, you're going to go all band, which band you go on? So you're working on one band because you're getting a good score. You want to see if the next band up is opening, so you can listen on the other rig for that. It does enable you to look for multipliers whilst you're calling CQ and hopefully working loads of contacts. And as I said, it allows propagation of the bands to be checked while running elsewhere. So it really means doing two things at once. Some things you need for SO2 are, you need 2 complete stations with no interaction between them. That's not strictly true, because I ran it without having 2 complete stations, but I'll tell you about that in a minute. You need a controller. If there's an old style controller there, and you can tell it's old because it's got a line port socket in the back, not a USB or that. That's an old DX Labs one. That you can have a look at it in a minute. Okay, that's an old DX Lab one. You need good software that will run it. Wintest will, N1MM Plus will. It's easy with N1MM. You know, just one key and bang, it switched everything over to the other thing. The only trouble I have now is finding a line port lead out the back of my desktop, which has still got a line port, but that does work. And you need good ergonomics and total automation. Well, I didn't have total automation, but I made it work. But you need a good operator. And again, it's fine. But if you're on the 45th hour of a 48-hour contest, are you still a good operator then? That's a very brief look at an SO2. So basically, as he said, you've got 2 stations. Okay, so you've got the transmit receive bandpass filter. The reason for that is because you don't want that to be desensing that. Linear or not, as the case may be. And when it says auto, it means you change band and it changes bands. And auto, and it says the same. When you change band, it changes band. That's okay. Same down there, same thing down there. Then you've got your SR controller, which basically you have a paddle if it's CW, microphone, headphones, but then yes, that's controlled by the software, by your software basically. I ran mine slightly differently. I had 1 linear because my linear's got 2 inputs, input 1, input 2. So basically I had out of the band passes then into the linear, and that was switched by my controller. So that's how it works, but it is very difficult. I've only tried it twice, I think, and I found at my age it was hard going. People say it's nice just to listen to one. You just listen to one rig in one ear and the other rig in the other ear. No, I can't do that. You have to have some bleed over because the ears aren't meant for listening for totally separate things in each ear. You find that confusing. You know, most people's brains need a little bit of this in that one, a little bit of that in that one. It's you try it. Try just listening to one thing in one ear and one in the other with no bleed over, and it's actually quite hard. I think that's it. That's all I was going to say. I just stuck that bit on the end, and it's really any questions. And I say it was meant mainly for beginners because we could have gone into a lot more depth for some of it. But anybody got any questions, really?
Just a comment, if anybody's not tried, if you hear a contest on it, you think, I'll work a few and give a few points away, and you only made 4 or 5 stations, do put the log in.
Yes.
Because some of the contests, if you're the only one that station has heard, they may not allow it to go.
Yeah, unique. Yeah. Like if you come on one of the club members on, try and work at least 2 people, because they sometimes look at one. That came about because there was a country not awfully far from the UK. Where what they were doing, they were going into the club station and they were getting a list of club members, and they were working their own contest station from the club station with just all the club members. And it was the only ones they were working, and it got twigged because why is this station the only one that's worked this 100 extra people?
Set it all up.
Yeah. So, you know, you've got to be careful.
In some areas, it doesn't matter what type of antenna you've got. The QRM is so bad,
Yeah.
you don't get out.
But that's when I said you learn your rig.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember doing one of the contests up at the farm, and somebody who was quite a good VHF operator was operating there, And he was on 40 metres and he kept saying, I can't do anything with this, I can't do anything. And he had the preamp on the RF gain full up. So the first thing I did was turn the preamp off and back the RF gain down. And suddenly you could get signals. You know, these are the sort of things you've got to do. That's why having a listen at least on a contest is good. Play with your rig, resolve these signals. You know, it really makes you into...
Two different techniques, HF and VHF.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Oh yes, but you need to learn. You need to learn your rig.
If you've got people around you who are running a lot of VHF, then you haven't got problems.
Yeah, yeah, but again.
You better move then, James. You've got no chance there.
No use looking at me because I don't run VHF from home. I do from Liddington, but not from home.
I was just thinking, they're away next door.
Yeah.
Sending their daughter home.
Yeah.
It's much better upstairs on the radio.
Huh?
Yeah, you said, didn't you?
What have they got that making noise then?
I don't know.
Okay.
But he'll replace it in a few months anyway, whatever it is.
Okay, right, okay. Anybody got any other questions? Or? Okay, right, that's fine. Well, thank you guys. I just hope it gets you to have, yeah, sorry for lumbering you like that, but you did it the other night and it worked well. You know, it's better to have somebody who's done some experience. Hope it perhaps tempts somebody into having a little bit of a go, or certainly the weekend after next, have a listen to CQWW. It's sideband, it's not CW, it's sideband. So have a listen and see how many countries you can hear, if nothing else. Just practice, you know, picking them out. Single sideband, yeah. Okay, thank you folks.
Yeah.